Fresh out of college with my business degree, I found myself right back where I started, in my childhood bedroom. I'm Anna, 22 years old, and to be honest, moving back in with my parents wasn't part of the plan. But there I was. The job hunt, thankfully, didn't take long. Within a week, I landed a position at Davidson Marketing with a pretty decent salary and the promise of performance bonuses. That evening, over a dinner of my mom's classic meatloaf, I shared the good news. I figured I'd stay here for about 3 months, save up a good chunk of money, and then finally get my own apartment. The sound of forks scraping against ceramic plates suddenly stopped. My mom and dad exchanged one of their signature looks, the kind that always signaled that trouble was on the horizon. "Moving out?" Mom asked, setting her fork down carefully. "Anna, you know with my back, I can only manage to work part-time at the library." My dad cleared his throat. "And things aren't looking great down at the plant. There have been rumors of layoffs going around. We could really use your help with the bills," Mom added, her voice soft and pleading. "And you wouldn't have to pay any rent here. It just makes more financial sense, doesn't it?" I stared down at my half-eaten slice of meatloaf, a feeling of being trapped creeping over me. They had a point, in a way, and they were my parents. I guess I could stay a little longer. Life quickly settled into a predictable routine after that. I went to work, I came home, I paid the household bills, and Mom made sure dinner was always waiting on the table. It seemed okay, manageable even. That is, until last weekend when my sister Sarah showed up with her husband, Mike, and their 2 kids, Emma and Lucas. The shift in my parents was instantaneous, like someone had flipped a switch. "Oh, my precious angels," Mom cooed, scooping 4-year-old Emma into a hug while Dad swung little Lucas up onto his shoulders. "Sarah, darling, you look absolutely wonderful. How is everything? Tell us everything you've been up to." I stood in the doorway, an invisible observer, as my parents fawned over their eldest daughter and her picture-perfect family. They hung on her every word, asking for intricate details about the most mundane parts of her life. How her vegetable garden was growing, what new words Lucas was learning, what her book club was reading. They had never shown that level of intense interest in my life, not even when I made the dean's list every semester or won the business school's student leadership award. "Anna, sweetie, could you be a doll and get some coffee going?" Mom called over her shoulder, not even glancing in my direction as she bounced Lucas on her knee. Standing in the kitchen that day, listening to the sound of my family's cheerful laughter drifting in from the living room, I couldn't help but think about how it had always been this way. Sarah, who is 7 years older than me, had always been the star of our family's show. I was permanently cast in a supporting role. I remember sitting at that very same kitchen table when I was 11, proudly showing Mom my report card full of straight A's. She barely gave it a look before turning her attention back to Sarah, who was talking about her college applications. "That's nice, Anna," she said, her voice distant, waving me away dismissively. "Sarah, honey, which universities are you thinking of for your top choices?" Those years were entirely consumed by Sarah's high school achievements. Every single dinner conversation seemed to revolve around her grades, her extracurricular activities, her college prep courses. I would just sit there quietly eating my green beans, while Mom and Dad listened with rapt attention to every word Sarah said about her AP classes and her tours of college campuses. Everything shifted even more dramatically when Sarah got accepted to a university out of state. I was 11 at the time, and I can still remember that dinner conversation as if it were yesterday. "We are so incredibly proud of you, sweetheart," Mom had exclaimed, her eyes welling up with tears. "We'll make it work, won't we, Robert?" Dad nodded with a solemn expression. "We'll take out a student loan. Our Sarah deserves the best education money can buy." A week after Sarah left for college, my parents sat me down for a very different kind of conversation. "Anna," Dad said, his voice uncharacteristically serious, "we're going to need to tighten our belts for a while. The loan payments and all of Sarah's college expenses are going to be significant. That's when things really began to change for me. While my classmates were getting new phones every year, I held onto my old flip phone until the plastic casing literally started to fall apart. When I needed new clothes, we went to thrift stores instead of the mall. Christmas gifts became practical necessities like socks and school supplies, but they never, ever forgot to send Sarah money. "Your sister needs to be able to focus on her studies," Mom would say as she wrote out another check to mail to her. "We can't let her feel stressed about money. I learned my lesson early on." By the time I was 15, I had joined every club and academic competition my school offered. I stayed up late into the night studying, not just for good grades, but for perfect ones. I wrote endless essays for scholarship competitions until my hands would cramp, because I knew with absolute certainty that there would be no student loans for me. It all paid off. I earned a full scholarship to State University, and I can still vividly remember the look of sheer relief on my parents' faces when I told them they wouldn't have to spend a single dime on my education. Meanwhile, Sarah graduated, got a job in a city a few hours away, and quickly married Mike, her college sweetheart. Within 2 years, she had Emma, and Lucas followed shortly after. My parents were over the moon. Their perfect daughter had created her own perfect family. Now, every monthly visit turned into the exact same routine. Sarah and Mike would show up with the kids, and before I could even manage a proper hello, Sarah would already be laying out her plans for the weekend. "Anna, you'll watch Emma and Lucas while we go shopping, right?" she'd say, phrasing it as a statement, not a question. Mike and I barely get any alone time these days. The first few times, I tried to suggest that our parents could watch them instead. "Oh, honey," Mom would say, rubbing her lower back theatrically. "You know it's hard for me to keep up with young children, and your father needs his rest on the weekends." So there I was, spending yet another Saturday watching Frozen for what felt like the 100th time with Emma, while Lucas attempted to use my bedroom walls as his personal coloring book. Sarah and Mike were off having lunch with friends, and our parents were puttering around in the garden, occasionally peeking in to ask if I needed anything, as if they were the ones doing me a favor. I tried to console myself with the thought that it was just one weekend a month, just one weekend of being the free, reliable babysitter, while everyone else went on living their lives. A year passed in this monthly rhythm of babysitting and bill paying. I had almost gotten used to it. Almost. Then came the phone call that would turn my already complicated life completely upside down. I was at the sink doing dishes after dinner when I heard my mom's phone ring from the kitchen table. I could hear her surprised voice. "Sarah?" "Oh, sweetheart, don't cry. Tell me what happened." Through a series of heart-wrenching sobs, Sarah explained that Mike's company had gone bankrupt without any warning. They couldn't afford their rent anymore and had absolutely no savings. Could we maybe stay with you for a little while?" Sarah's voice was so loud and desperate through the phone that I could hear it clearly from across the room. "Of course you can," Mom exclaimed without a single moment of hesitation. "We'll make room for you." My stomach plummeted. I stepped forward, clearing my throat. If they're moving in, maybe this would be a good time for me to start looking for my own apartment. You would have thought I had just suggested setting the house on fire." Mom looked at me as if I had lost my mind. "Anna, don't be ridiculous. There's plenty of room for everyone." "We're family," Dad said firmly, his tone leaving no room for argument. "We stick together during hard times." They arrived the very next weekend with 3 cars packed full of their belongings. I spent that Saturday morning moving all of my things into what had previously been our storage room, the smallest bedroom in the house, a space barely big enough for a twin bed and a small dresser. My old room, which was twice the size, was transformed into the kids' nursery because, as my mother explained, the children need space to play. Emma, now 5, and 3-year-old Lucas treated the entire house like their personal jungle gym. They would run up and down the hallways screaming and laughing at the top of their lungs, while Sarah would watch TV at full volume or have long, loud phone conversations with her friends about how difficult this whole transition was for her. "Emma, Lucas, keep it down." I'd call out when they would burst into my tiny room for the 10th time in an hour, scattering my work papers all over the floor. "They're just being kids, Anna," Sarah would say dismissively, not even bothering to look up from her phone. "Don't be such a killjoy." After a long day at work, all I wanted was to relax in my room, maybe read a book or watch something on my laptop. Instead, my evenings were scored by Baby Shark playing on a relentless loop through the thin walls, punctuated by the constant thumping of little feet running back and forth, and Sarah's loud cackles at whatever sitcom she was watching downstairs. Mike spent his days supposedly job hunting, but mostly I saw him sitting at the kitchen table, endlessly scrolling through his phone with a worried look on his face. "The job market's really tough right now," he'd mumble whenever anyone asked, "but I'm sure something will come up soon." I would lie in my tiny bed each night, staring at the water-stained ceiling, listening to the chaos that had consumed my home, and wonder how I had let myself get trapped in this situation. But every time I even thought about bringing up the topic of moving out again, I would remember my parents' horrified reaction, and I'd just keep my mouth shut. The first utility bill that arrived after Sarah's family moved in hit me like a punch to the gut. I stood in the kitchen staring at the numbers on the paper, which were almost double what I usually paid. The water bill alone had skyrocketed, not to mention the electricity and gas. Looking at my bank account, I realized that my dreams of saving up for my own place were quickly evaporating into thin air. That evening at dinner, I decided I had to bring it up. So, about the utility bills, I started, pushing my peas around on my plate. They've doubled since last month. I can't keep covering all the bills by myself anymore. It's taking almost my entire salary. Sarah's fork clattered loudly against her plate. "Are you seriously complaining about money right now, when Mike and I have lost everything?" "I'm not complaining," I said, trying to keep my voice even. "I just think we need to figure out a fair way to—" "I can't believe how selfish you're being." Sarah's voice rose, filled with indignation. "We are going through the hardest time of our lives, and all you can think about is money." "Sarah's right, Anna," Mom jumped in, defending her. "Family helps family. That's just what we do." Dad nodded solemnly in agreement. "Your sister and Mike need our support right now. This isn't the time to be counting pennies." I looked down at my plate, swallowing the angry words I really wanted to say. Fine, never mind. A week later, Mike finally landed a job at an insurance company. It paid less than his previous position, but at least it was something. I thought that maybe, just maybe, things would start getting better. I was wrong. It's so hard being alone with the kids all day. Sarah started complaining almost immediately. Mike leaves at 8 in the morning and doesn't get back until after 6. I never get a break. Then it started with small requests. "Anna, could you just watch the kids for an hour while I run to the store? Anna, would you mind keeping an eye on them while I take a quick shower?" Before I knew it, these small favors had snowballed into something much bigger, an unspoken expectation. I'd come home from a long day at work to find Sarah already dressed up and ready to go out. "Oh, good, you're home," she'd say, grabbing her purse. "Mike and I are meeting some friends for dinner. Emma and Lucas already had their snack, but they'll need dinner in about an hour. We'll probably be back by 10. Weekends became my personal nightmare. Sarah and Mike would casually announce their plans on Friday evening. A shopping trip, lunch with friends, a movie date, leaving me with the kids for hours on end. My parents conveniently started visiting relatives more often, usually disappearing right after Sarah and Mike left. So there I'd be, weekend after weekend, trying to keep Emma from drawing on the living room walls while Lucas had another full-blown tantrum because I cut his sandwich into squares instead of triangles. I'd spend my Saturdays cleaning up scattered toys, making mac and cheese, and watching endless repeats of children's movies. By Sunday night, I'd be completely exhausted. The house would be a disaster, and I'd still have to figure out what to cook for dinner for everyone. One evening, after a particularly exhausting weekend of non-stop childcare, I finally worked up the courage to say something at the dinner table. "I need to talk to you all," I said, setting down my fork. "I'm really tired. This situation with the childcare, it isn't working for me." Sarah's head snapped up, her eyes narrowing. What do you mean? It isn't working. Are you saying you don't want to spend time with your own nephew and niece? Mom reached over and patted Sarah's hand reassuringly. Don't worry, honey, this is actually good practice for Anna. She'll need to know how to handle children when she becomes a mother herself someday. Think of it as training. And just like that, they went right back to their usual dinner conversation, with Sarah talking about her day, and Mom and Dad hanging on her every word while Mike nodded along. I sat there, invisible once again, just pushing food around on my plate. Nothing changed after that conversation. If anything, it got worse. Sarah and Mike seemed to take my complaint as a personal challenge, finding even more reasons to go out. They'd be waiting by the front door when I got home from work, car keys in hand. We're meeting friends at that new restaurant downtown, they'd say, already halfway out the door. The kids have had their snack. Thanks, Anna. Weekends became something I actively dreaded. I'd wake up on Saturday mornings with a knot of anxiety in my stomach, knowing that I was about to spend the next 2 days watching Paw Patrol and mediating sibling squabbles while Sarah and Mike lived their best lives. Then came a Wednesday that changed everything. I was at my desk at work trying to focus on a marketing report despite my bone-deep exhaustion, when my friend Rachel stopped by my cubicle. Hey, want to do something fun this weekend? She asked, perching on the edge of my desk. A bunch of us are going up to the Pine Ridge Ski Resort. Just a quick weekend getaway. We'll leave Saturday morning and come back Sunday night. The slopes are supposed to be perfect right now. For the first time in months, I felt a genuine spark of excitement. Friday evening, I was in my tiny bedroom, packing my duffel bag, actually feeling happy about an upcoming weekend for once. I had just finished folding my warmest sweater when Sarah appeared in my doorway. "What are you doing?" she asked, eyeing my half-packed bag with suspicion. "I'm packing for a ski trip," I replied, rolling up a pair of thermal socks. "I'm going to Pine Ridge with some friends from work." Sarah's face darkened. "You need to cancel." I looked up, startled by the commanding tone in her voice. "What? Why would I do that?" "Because," she said, crossing her arms over her chest, "Mike and I are going to Aunt Linda's 60th birthday party in Millbrook this weekend. Mom and Dad are coming too. You need to stay here with Emma and Lucas." I couldn't help but laugh. I actually laughed out loud at the sheer, unadulterated audacity of it all. "You're joking, right?" I said, continuing to fold my ski pants. "You can't seriously expect me to cancel my plans because you didn't bother to tell me about yours." Sarah's face turned a blotchy red. "This isn't funny, Anna. You're being completely unreasonable." "No, what's unreasonable is you assuming that I'll just drop everything at a moment's notice to be your personal babysitter. Again." Sarah's mouth fell open. She stood there for a moment, sputtering, before turning on her heel and storming out of my room. "Mom! Dad! Mike!" I could hear her shouting as she stomped down the hallway. "You are not going to believe what Anna is doing." I kept packing, my hands shaking slightly with a surge of anger. The thundering of footsteps on the stairs announced the arrival of the cavalry. My tiny room suddenly felt even smaller as Sarah, Mike, and my parents crowded into the doorway. My mom's face was already set in that familiar, disappointed expression I knew so well. "What's this about you going skiing?" she demanded, her hands on her hips. "It's exactly what it sounds like," I replied, zipping up my duffel bag. "I'm going to Pine Ridge Resort with my friends for the weekend." "But you can't," Sarah exclaimed. "We have Aunt Linda's party." "No, you have Aunt Linda's party," I corrected her. I stopped what I was doing and turned to face all of them. Why am I just now hearing about this party? Why wasn't I included in any of the planning? Mom hesitated, looking uncomfortable for the first time. Sarah jumped in, her voice dripping with condescension. "We all discussed it and decided this would work out best for everyone. We go to the party, you watch the kids. It's the most logical arrangement. You all discussed it," I repeated slowly, letting the words sink in. "Without me. And you decided what I would be doing with my weekend. How convenient for all of you." "Well, you can't exactly bring small children to a sophisticated party," Sarah sniffed. "Aunt Linda specifically said no kids. I shouldered my duffel bag. Sounds like a you problem. They're your kids, Sarah. Figure it out. What's that supposed to mean? Mike finally spoke up, a frown creasing his forehead. It means exactly what it sounds like. I have plans. I'm going skiing. Your children are your responsibility, not mine. If you can't bring them to the party, then either don't go or hire a babysitter. A babysitter? Sarah screeched. With what money? Again, not my problem, I said. I turned to face them all, suddenly feeling stronger and more centered than I had in months, maybe even years. Let me make this perfectly clear. I am going skiing tomorrow. I am done being your free, convenient babysitter. I'm done having my weekends hijacked, my plans ignored, and my life treated like it's an afterthought. If you need childcare, Sarah, that is your responsibility as a parent. Stop assuming I'll always be here to pick up your slack. The silence that followed was deafening. They all just stared at me as if I had suddenly grown a second head. Sarah's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. Mom looked like she had been physically slapped. Dad seemed to be trying to shrink into the door frame. And Mike just stood there with that same bewildered expression he'd been wearing ever since his company went bankrupt. The moment of shocked silence didn't last long. Sarah's face crumpled, and she burst into a performance of theatrical sobs, covering her face with her hands. Mike muttered something under his breath that sounded distinctly like ungrateful. "How dare you?" My mom's voice rose, sharp and piercing. "After everything we've done for you, you're being completely irresponsible." "Selfish," Dad chimed in, shaking his head in disapproval. "Absolutely selfish." I stood there, my duffel bag still slung over my shoulder, watching my family transform into a Greek chorus of accusations. The words washed over me: selfish, ungrateful, inconsiderate, immature. Each one was a carefully chosen weapon designed to cut deep and put me back in my place. Then Mom delivered what she clearly thought would be the knockout blow. "If you walk out that door tomorrow, don't even bother coming back to this house." To everyone's complete surprise, I burst out laughing. Not a nervous giggle, but a full, genuine, liberating laugh. They all stared at me as if I'd finally lost my mind. "You know what's funny?" I said, wiping a tear of mirth from my eye. "I've been dreaming about moving out of this house for months. I just didn't have the guts to do it. But here you are, giving me the perfect excuse. So thank you, Mom. Get out!" Sarah shrieked, her fake sobs instantly forgotten in a wave of pure rage. "Just get out!" Gladly. I pulled out my phone and dialed Rachel's number, putting it on speaker just to make a point. "Hey, Rach, sorry to call so late, but is that offer to crash at your place still good? Not just for after the ski trip, but maybe for a few days." "Of course." Rachel's cheerful voice filled the tense room. "I have a spare room. You want to come over now?" "That would be perfect. I'll be there in 20 minutes. I spent the next 15 minutes gathering everything I could possibly fit into my car. Clothes, important documents, personal items. They watched from various doorways as I made trips up and down the stairs, as if they couldn't quite believe I was actually going through with it. When I had loaded the last box into my trunk, I walked back into the living room where they had all gathered. "Oh, and one more thing," I said, my voice steady and calm. "Since I won't be living here anymore, I guess I won't be paying any of the bills either. You'll all need to figure out how to support yourselves." My mom's face went pale. But the utilities, the groceries." "Not my problem anymore," I said, echoing my words from earlier. I turned and walked out the front door, ignoring the sound of my mom's suddenly panicked voice calling my name behind me. The drive to Rachel's place was a blur of adrenaline and overwhelming relief. My phone kept lighting up with calls and messages, angry texts from Sarah, guilt-ridden novels from Mom, stern lectures of disappointment from Dad. I ignored them all. The next morning, Rachel and I drove up to Pine Ridge Resort as planned. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, I spent an entire weekend doing exactly what I wanted to do. We skied, we laughed, We drank hot chocolate by a roaring fire, and not once did I have to worry about anyone else's children or their problems. When we got back on Sunday night, I opened my laptop and started searching for apartments. With my salary no longer being funneled into supporting my entire family, I could actually afford a decent place of my own. By Wednesday, I had found a small but bright one-bedroom apartment in a nice part of town, just a 15-minute drive from my office. My first week in my new apartment was like learning to breathe again. Every morning, I woke up to blessed, beautiful silence. No screaming children, no blaring TV, no guilt-inducing sighs from my mother. I could make a cup of coffee and actually drink it while it was still hot. I could spend my evenings reading or watching whatever I wanted on Netflix. The messages, however, kept coming. I didn't answer the calls, but I couldn't help but read the texts. They followed a predictable and exhausting pattern. From Mom, "How could you abandon your family like this? We need you." From Sarah, "You are so selfish. The kids keep asking where Aunt Anna is." From Dad, "Your mother is very upset. You need to make this right." The messages cycled between guilt trips and outright anger, accusations and pleas. I read every single one, but I responded to none of them. My silence seemed to drive them even crazier. They weren't used to not having power over me. After a week of this, I was sitting on my new couch when Mom's number flashed on my phone again. This time, I decided to answer. "Anna, finally!" Mom's voice was sharp. "I can't believe you ruined our entire weekend. Aunt Linda's party was completely disrupted because of your selfish behavior. Sarah and Mike couldn't even go because you refused to watch the children. Mom, stop." My voice was quiet but firm. "Just stop. I'm done with this. I'm done being treated like a servant in what was supposed to be my own home. I'm done being expected to sacrifice everything, my time, my money, my life, for everyone else's convenience. I'm done being the family ATM and the free babysitter while being treated like I don't even matter." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. When Mom finally spoke again, her voice had changed to that wheedling, manipulative tone I knew so well. "Honey, I know things haven't been perfect, but we're family. We need you. The bills this month. We're struggling without your help. No, Mom, I'm done. Maybe someday we can have a relationship again, but it will be on equal terms. No more manipulation, no more guilt trips, no more treating me like a walking wallet or a free childcare service. Until then, I need space to live my own life." I hung up the phone and immediately blocked her number. Then I went through my contacts and blocked them all. Mom, Dad, Sarah, even Mike. I blocked them on all my social media accounts too. It felt both terrifying and incredibly liberating, like I was cutting the anchor lines that I hadn't even realized were holding me down and dragging me under. Maybe someday I'll be ready to have my family back in my life. Maybe with enough time and distance, we can build something new, something healthier, something with boundaries and mutual respect. Or maybe we won't. Either way, I'm done sacrificing my own happiness and well-being to meet their endless selfish demands. End of story.